Hello and welcome to Dragoon X Omega 2. This is the final second version from 2008 by Silver X and Thaddeus. Thank you, Silver X and Thaddeus. This is a total conversion ROM hack of Final Fantasy I. You may recognize the introduction screen here. A lot of aesthetics are definitely similar to Final Fantasy I. This is a sequel, of course, to Dragoon X Omega, centuries ago, yada, yada, yada. We have a 1,000 years in the future from the events of the original game, which I believe is a hack of Dragon Warrior 1. This one is Final Fantasy I. So the Shogunnites have the Sai ability, which is like the magic ability. We have a few references to some of the towns that we're going to see. Sargon is our character here, and we're going to be talking a lot about the differences between Final Fantasy I Vanilla and this game. And also we're going to see little nuggets of the original game kind of pop up in here, so I'll try to point those out as I see them here in the first playthrough. This obviously has assets that look like the intro cutscene for Final Fantasy I once you unlock the bridge north of Corneria. You've got the little prologue plays out for you. So it began, and here we are. We're going to the keep right there. This is the overworld map. Immediately what you'll see, I'm going through the menus here. The magic levels are just like Final Fantasy I, except you have 2 spells at each level instead of 3, and I believe there's only 2 available at each level, so you don't have to choose which spells you want to use. You can just get access to all of them, I believe. So, looking at this game, the visual aesthetic is a little bit challenging for me as a player, if I'm going to be reviewing this in terms of its playability. The color palette that's chosen is interesting, but it's often very dark, and there are times when the color palette chosen is confusing, particularly with the color black. I can understand why black would be used to indicate shadows. I think visually that makes sense. When you see pillars right there, the black bars to the sides of the pillars indicate that that pillar has a shadow beneath it. That's fine. I'm okay with that, but there are times when black means a doorway you can go into. There are times when black means a hole that you cannot enter. It's an end of the level. There are times when black means a hole that you can fall into. And then there are times when black is a wall. It's supposed to be a shadow on the wall. And those are not delineated at all by anything different in different dungeons. So the visual aesthetics for communicating the information that I as a player need sometimes leave something to be desired here. So we've been betrayed in the story here. We've been betrayed by our friend, and we need to go over and defeat him. But we're talking to all the important people as part of these Shogunnites. And here we're about to pick up our first weapon. Right now, your base damage is just equal to half of your strength. I have 10 strength, and my base damage was 5. Now my base damage is 10. And if that works the same way as it does in Final Fantasy I, which it seems to, having played and watched this game quite a bit, your damage is just a straight-up random damage roll between your damage value and twice your damage value. So between D and 2D, you get a random roll between that value, and then that's the result of each successful hit. So right now my damage is 10 to 20, so that's what that looks like. Critical hits are double that top, and they take out enemy defense if they work the same way they do. So we need to head to the Marsh Temple, and I'm hoping that the Marsh Temple is not like the Marsh Cave in Final Fantasy I. Another little thing that bothers me a little bit about the visual layout here is closed doors. Use a sprite, or looks like a background tile, a wall tile, that looks the same as like a window that is just part of the scenery. So there's not always a really clear indication that this is a door you can go through. Sometimes that is a piece of scenery on the wall. Here I looked at my menu, and obviously I'm level 13. That's the result of the power leveling that I am very, very want to do when I make these blind playthroughs of a game like this. I want them to be as smooth as I can. The crawls of dungeons, I really like them to be easy and fast, and not show you the kind of grindy nature of this game. So we can hear the battle theme a little bit, and we're out here in the world map. So the world map uses some of the assets that FF1 uses, but nothing that I've seen is directly borrowed yet. It looks like there must be, they built it out of other assets existing within the game. So it's pretty nice so far. Here we have, again, a very, very dark color palette. Everything is really dark. I imagine that's supposed to be just part of the atmospheric nature of this. This is the clinic, which is the inn in Final Fantasy 1. And the keeper of the inn says two things just like the Final Fantasy 1 does. So, but the Final Fantasy 1 innkeeper, I believe she talks about pushing B while you turn the console off. The designers of this game obviously did not need anything like that because we're playing it on emulators. Speaking of hardware that I'm playing this on, I am playing this on suboptimal software kind of on purpose because I want to see what the experience is like for users of Mac computers on these kinds of things. And I'll tell you, it's very difficult for Mac users, having worked with this. I'm trying to give myself those same constraints. So you'll sometimes see the emulation is not super smooth. Those are level 2 spells that I already have access to. I started with 2 level 1 spells, one called Aura, which is like a cure spell, and one called Bolt, which is a single targeting direct damage spell. The doctor here is like the item shop, so I can buy herbs, antidotes, and the SRAMs are like tents. The SRAMs restore some hit points and they save the game on the world map only. I have not yet seen a way to... I hope you're reading all this text because I'm not going through all of it. The SRAMs are a way to save the game in the world map. I've not seen a way to save the game in dungeons, and FF1 does not have a way to save in dungeons. So we'll discover if they've made changes to that, because that capability is definitely there. Some notable hacks of Final Fantasy 1 have put like inns and clinics in the Temple of Fiends Revisited, in the final dungeon, when they turn that already long dungeon into an even longer dungeon. They put inns and clinics and item shops and things down in the basement of the Temple of Fiends Revisited. So I don't know if the hackers of this game built that in. There is a B dash, so the hackers of this game have given us the B dash. So when you hold down the B button, you do move at double speed, which is very, very handy. So here we are in the Marsh Cave, and I hope you're going to see some of the black areas that are visually confusing to me as a player. Just something that will take some getting used to. It's not a major broken part of the game. There is a treasure chest that also is a little bit tricky to see. That may be on purpose. Here I'm talking to the Shogunnites, and they have turned on me. They are traitors. They are now going to attack me. So all of the Shogunnites that I talk to are going to say die. So these are the sprite-initiated encounters. FF1 has mostly bosses are sprite-initiated encounters. So you've got things like the vampire, and you've got the fiends, balls. You've got Garland as a sprite-initiated encounter. They're not tile-initiated, they're not trap tiles, and nor are they part of the step count. Speaking of the step counter, I assume that has been used pretty much as it is in Final Fantasy 1. Maybe the progression of it has changed. But of course, the encounter rate is as high as you remember in the dungeons from Final Fantasy 1. As I'm fighting a lot of these Shogunnites and the snipers. You will recognize the sound effects of attacks both on enemies to your character and your character to enemies. The and the those very, very poorly imitated sound effects by me, they are taken directly from Final Fantasy 1. And now, because my character is leveled up so high, I am one-shotting these guys. But I would like to talk about the difficulty curve in this game. Like a lot of hacks, is rather steep at the beginning. You are fairly cash poor, which is a standard for any 8-bit RPG. You're very poor on money at the beginning of the game. And I looked at this dungeon a little bit when I was at level 1 and 2, and it was just brutal. Sometimes even just getting to this dungeon would drain your resources. There's a couple of enemies that have really strong physical defense, and they almost require you to use a psi attack on them, at least at level 1. Your first few levels, thankfully, are pretty strong level ups in terms of hit point growth, so every level you gain is a pretty good jump in power against these early game enemies. But the reason I do my power leveling when I play the game like this is just for situations like this. these characters would sometimes take 2, 3, 4 rounds to defeat, and even at level 13, they're taking me 2 hits to take down. So you could imagine if I was still using the very first gun available in this game. And we're about to see kind of a major sidetrack here because I see stairs going down to the next level. I was trying to, when I crawl a dungeon floor in a blind playthrough, I try to explore a whole floor, a whole area before I start going into doors or before I start exploring other areas. And I was walking past all of these black areas thinking that one or more of them may have been entrances into that room. And I'm finding out here now I wasn't checking them as I was going along, and they are indeed just shadows on the wall, I suppose. And now this area is a shadow area, but over in other places, that black area indicates, a pit that you can't go into and you can't fall into it. But later on, we'll actually see a dungeon that has a pit that you can fall into, and that's the only way to progress is to go into a pit. So the visual language struggles a little bit for me as a player. But let's talk about my hardware and software again. I'm eschewing the use of my gaming PC to capture this, and I'm trying to do it as someone who is a Mac mandatory player would be. I'm using OpenEMU. OpenEMU, to my knowledge, doesn't have a good patching program, so I actually had to use Lunar IPS on my PC, which is an EXE program that can hard patch games. I created a hard patch of this game where I actually created a new ROM. Soft patching is where your emulator applies the patch as it loads the game up, so you kind of don't ever have to make a new file. I prefer to hard patch my games and just have them as another game in the library. But that's the only way that I could find to do it on the Mac. That's okay because I do that anyway. But OpenEMU runs things okay. The emulation is not always super stable. You'll sometimes see more variance in how smoothly it runs. And this is a fairly new Mac, and this is something that I've actually seen more problems on the newer Mac than on older versions of the Mac OS with OpenEMU. I'm capturing with OBS, Open Broadcaster software, which is the same program I use on my PC, of course, just using the Mac version. And again, the same thing. The Mac has problems running OBS, particularly in capturing audio. You have to install another third-party application to allow the Mac to capture audio of a game that's being played on it. So if you are exclusive to Mac, you can make this work and you can record decent quality gameplay footage. That you can do it, but it requires a little bit more work, and your product is not going to be quite as nice. But I'm giving myself that extra challenge, I suppose you would say. And then to record these, I am using my gaming PC again with Audacity and my microphone, because that's where my audio setup is anyway. I could do that all on the Mac also with Audacity. So here, look at what I'm looking at. The black area there was a pit that I couldn't cross. It wasn't just a shadow that I could cross. And I believe that this is supposed to be the final version of this game, and it's been around for a number of years. There's a lot of great reviews for this game online. So, but if I was giving feedback to a beta version of this one, that would be feedback I would give, is try to make the visual language a little more clear. So the sniper is using Aura. I have access to Aura, which heals a pretty significant chunk of hit points. Bolt it says bioelectric damage, but it's single targeting. The level 2 spells I have are both status spells. One of them, I believe, is like a darkness spell that lowers their accuracy, the enemy accuracy, and the other one, I think, is an evasion spell, but it says reaction time up is the prompt that the game gives you. And I was not able to find a comprehensive guide document to this. If I'm missing one, I'd love it if you would let me know, or if maybe the designers could get in touch and let me know if there is a full README of this. I have seen the README that's published on Romhack's website, but that README usually just has, I believe, has a list of bug fixes and different release dates, and a few little things about it. There is a fandom.wikia article about this game that has a lot of the narrative things. I wasn't able to find a comprehensive guide there, though. And I don't know if I'm the one who needs to write that or not. I don't know. I'm making an LP of it, but I don't know if I'm the one who needs to write and publish that. When I do those, though, I prefer to have the mechanics behind it, and I don't have a good and easy way to read the mechanics and algorithms. So I defeated that Shogunite, thinking that I probably had to go through that space, but as I was fighting him, I wondered if the shadow next to him was not just a space that I could walk over, and indeed it was. So I think I probably could have walked right by that Shogunite without speaking to him and initiating the encounter. The level 3 spells I have one spell that appears to be the mute spell. It's called Anti-Psi or a Block Psi or something. It stops enemies from casting Psi spells. I've used it on a couple of bigger enemies and haven't gotten it to land yet. Then the other one is called something about genetic damage. We'll see a gene rot. I think it's called gene rot. And it's a multi-targeting spell, area of effect. So it works kind of like the Fire 2 or Bolt 2 spells in Final Fantasy 1. This one, in Final Fantasy 1 and in this game, you cannot control which of your spells are single targeting and which ones are all targeting. You don't have that ability like in later Final Fantasy games where you can do single target or all target on your black magic spells. The music on this game is quite nice. I do enjoy the music here. I'm not sure who the credited composer is on this. The two names at the front, Silver X and Thaddeus, I would guess one of them did it, or maybe they knew someone else who put that together. The full credits document, I believe, is in the README that is available on the Romhacking site. So right now we're in the lower floor of the Marsh Cave, working our way towards our traitor friend, our traitorous friend. And I'm guessing that as we beat this one, you're going to be unlocking key items that get you around the game. That's kind of how Final Fantasy 1 works. You go from dungeon to dungeon, getting different key items to open up new areas. And key items can be like the Mystic Key, which lets you get another key item to trade at a trading sequence. They can also be transport items like the ship, the canoe, the airship. So that's what I believe we're going to be doing here in this game, is unlocking key items that can get us places in the world map that we otherwise couldn't go. This thankfully layout of this dungeon is visually coherent enough that I can see where I was and where I was going. That's a common problem with Final Fantasy 1 ROM hacks, is dungeon design gets very complex, and the narrow view of the Final Fantasy 1, how many tiles you can see on the screen, really makes it difficult, especially given that battles in Final Fantasy 1 transport you away from the map. And if you're fighting lots of battles, it can be very easy to forget which direction you are heading if you're in a big, sprawling room. Or if you're in a zigzag room where it's kind of difficult to remember, am I trying to head east to west or west to east? Or south to north? If you have lots of long battles and you're not super focused, that's actually a really psychologically draining part of that game. So here we are about to fight our traitorous friend who has kidnapped another one of our friendly Shogunite friends. So we're going to fight these other slurms here. And we are one-shotting the slurms, thankfully, not so much the Shogunites, but we are one-shotting the slurms. That is not the case at normal levels. I had to capture this this phrase. So the Sun Key is one of the key items. So this would be similar to like the "I, Garland, will knock you all down. You are always a fool." And here is Tyrus. Has the same sprite as the Shogunites. So I'm going to cast Shadow, which is going to, it says, reaction time up, which I'm guessing is going to help my evasion. And then Psyblock, Stare, I think, puts the enemies to sleep. Psyblock is supposed to stop them from casting Psy spells, and he's hit me with Bolt twice, and no effect. So it either missed or he is immune to it. There's Aura on himself. Here is Gene Rot. That is all targeting, 78 damage, and it's genetic damage, which is pretty funny. And he's hitting himself with Aura, which is fine. And I'm just firing at him. Now we're going to go with Bolts. Bolts do pretty good damage, although that one rolled fairly low. I'm not sure if he resisted it because it says bioelectric damage. I'm not sure how elements work in this. Bioelectric may be one element. Genetic damage may be another element. So this is Kia, or Kaya. And he tells us we must tell Lord Higa about all of this at once. So we are transported back to the keep that we started the game, right outside the gates of this keep. So we're going to go talk to Lord Higa. We have to go to Merca and find the source of the madness, and we have to succeed, Sargon. And so he says the Sun Key, and he says we have to go to Arturnus for the Air Key. Now, Arturnus is to our southeast. I don't think we've been told that yet. But to get there, there's a broken bridge. We have to go, not repair the bridge, but we have to get a vehicle that will take us across that broken bridge. Now, I picked up the Sun Key, and I believed that this locked door must be opened by the Sun Key. Door is locked and too stout to destroy. So there's no indication of what kind of key it is, and it says one of the 4 keys to open this. So I'm guessing we just have to find another key that will open that door. And see, here is another one. That window is the same sprite as that door right there. So as we're leaving the keep, we're going to wrap up part 1 of this video. If you like this one, you can hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, or check out one of my many other ROM hacks of various games. Many of them are Final Fantasy 1. And we will see you in part 2 as we head over to the next town.